So one of the habits that you're going to want to carry out moving forward in the next 30 days, but even lifelong, is reading nutrition labels, but more importantly, the ingredients list, because if you guys remember from that last video, the holy trinity of addictive compounds in foods are salts, fats, and sugars. So anything that represents those in many different forms, and I'm going to show you some examples of just how nefarious and kind of sneaky these brands are and how they get you to consume those things without you realizing it. So let's say you're having some ground beef or hamburger meat and you are getting tired of it and you want to zest it up a little bit. You might add something like Heinz tomato ketchup. And at first you might think this is just crushed up tomatoes because after all, it's only 20 calories. Well, let's take a look at the ingredients list to see just how many addictive compounds are in there. It has high fructose corn syrup, which is going to be mimicking the sugar aspect. It's highly addictive and it's actually banned in many European countries. It has salt in there, which is Holy Trinity number 2. And then it also has corn syrup, which is going to be mimicking that fat content. So not only does it have the Holy Trinity of all 3 addictive compounds, but it also has distilled vinegar, which is going to be another addictive sensation in your mouth. Anything spicy or that has that zinging compound that kind of hits you in the jowls right there, that's also going to release some dopamine and pleasure in your brain. Other things like vinegar that release that same sensation is anything like lemon zest, or again, anything that kind of hits you right there that makes you feel that sensation. Let's take a look at a different product that is what ketchup is really supposed to be. This is just chopped tomatoes, and if you look at the ingredients list, it's just tomatoes. If we were to measure the calories for each of these, this one's only 5 more calories. You might say, hey, what's the difference? Well, as we looked at the ingredients list, we found that this is a lot better option for you. Let's move on to something else, something like Sprite. Now, Sprite not only has the addictive compound of cane sugar in it, but remember we were talking about that spicy sensation. This has that as well in the form of carbonation. If you've ever had a kid drink a soda or a seltzer water, they say, oh, that's spicy. Well, why would they say that? It's not spicy. Well, it actually triggers those same receptors on your tongue that tell you this is spicy. So carbonation is going to do that same thing. So it's going to be releasing more dopamine. So what I would replace something like Sprite with is just regular seltzer water. It's going to give you that pleasure from the carbonation, but it's not going to have any of those other addictive ingredients in there like cane sugar. So it's going to give you pleasure from the carbonation, but it's not one of those holy trinity fats, salts, or sugars. Let's take a look at our next item, which is vanilla Greek yogurt. Greek yogurt is a phenomenal source of getting protein in. It also has calcium, and it's a probiotic, so that's wonderful. But if you've ever tried just plain Greek yogurt, it's absolutely nasty and it's hard to stomach. So you might opt for an option like vanilla, but let's take a look at the ingredient list. It has inside of it cane sugar, which is one of the holy trinity, and it also has lemon juice concentrate, which is going to be mimicking that zesty feel. So it has 2 addictive compounds in there. And one of the other ingredients in there that I'm not a huge fan of is it has bean gums in there. Now, anytime you read a nutrition label and it has gums, it is an ingredient that they use to help bind compounds together that would otherwise separate. So I'm not a huge fan of ingesting those because they're not very good for your gut. Let's talk about fats. In nature, there's animal fats that you might have in like ground beef. You might have fats from butter or cream, but then there's synthetically made things that mimic fat. One of them is oils. I'm not a huge fan of oils. They're not great for your gut. They completely disrupt your gut biome and your overall health. So something like canola oil, if you ever take a look at how it's processed, basically they derive it not from actual vegetables themselves, but it's from a form of wheat, and then they have to bleach it because it smells so rancid. And at the end of the day, I would rather have you guys not ingest foods like that, but instead opt to have foods that come from a whole source like butter. But again, you want to make sure that you read the ingredients list, because this one only contains sweet cream and salt, which is fantastic. Some of the other ones contain more of those addictive ingredients. So although they may taste similar, it's going to be sending you different dopamine, and we want to make sure that we are hijacking our dopamine reward receptors. I showed you guys the vanilla Greek yogurt, but I failed to show you the just regular plain Greek yogurt, which the only ingredients are cultured non-fat milk. So this is going to be much less addictive. But if you guys want to sweeten it up a bit, I would definitely recommend adding fruits to it, because fruits, although they have sugar in there, they're not going to spike your blood sugar as much because it has fiber and other natural ingredients that will help you digest the sugar in the way that it was meant to. And while we're on the topic of sugar, let's talk about sugary cravings. One of mine is ice cream. Like, that's one of the hardest things to resist. But one of the more recent finds that I've found that helps mitigate that is frozen mango. Now, this is completely different than frozen strawberries or blueberries that are kind of hard, and to me they're just not as enjoyable as like ice cream. But frozen mangoes is actually great because it still is kind of soft, but it's cold and it's still very sweet, and it's really a joy to eat. This whole bag here is just about 300 calories, so not a bad thing. Still something you don't want to overindulge in, but if you're going to have some sugar, I'd much rather you have it from a natural source. And then the last thing that I want to show you is something like protein powder. And you guys may be saying, hey, isn't protein powder a good thing? Well, let's take a look. The way that they get protein in protein powder is by separating the whey compound from the casein compound in the dairy, and they isolate that and put it into powder form. But after they put it in the powdered form, they want it to be highly palatable. So they'll put in things like salt, which is one of the holy addictive trinities to food. They put in soy lectin, which is going to be mimicking that fat compound. And they also put in 2 artificial sweeteners, which is sucralose, which is very sweet, and they put in stevia. And if you guys don't know, artificial sweeteners are about 700 times sweeter than actual cane sugar. So if we're talking about dopamine hijacking, those are going to give you a ton of, even if they might not be as enjoyable to you in terms of our brain chemistry, it's going to be 700 times sweeter. So if we take a look at this graph here, if we indulge with some traditional cane sugar, we might get a spike this high. But as you may imagine, artificial sweeteners are going to be spiking it up through the roof. That's why, if you've ever wondered why a lot of overweight people drink Diet Coke, although yes, it has 0 calories, it increases your dopamine receptors through the roof. So that's why you have huge cravings after you eat artificial sweeteners like the ones found in diet sodas. So I hope that helps. If you guys have any other questions in terms of addictive compounds or reading nutrition labels, please feel free to reach out. It's always safe to go with 1 ingredient foods or 2 ingredient foods, and to always be wary that although it might not say fat on it, it might say something like canola oil, sunflower oil, some sort of oils in there that will mimic that fat compound. Or although it might not say cane sugar, it might say something like high fructose corn syrup, or sucralose or dextrose. They can be very sneaky with the types of foods that they put in there. So it's better to just know that you're getting a 1 ingredient food rather than a bunch of things mixed in together that are made to keep you addicted and to be a repeat customer and to spike the profits of the shareholders.